Hello, I'm going to try and make this video short. This is one Christian guy that he would say, well, he's making a joke about people and what they are. He said, make your video. He said, oh, how do I get my people to watch my video? He said, make your video 2 minutes or less, so I'll watch. It was funny. People. I don't know if there's that many people really. I mean, a few people, but I know the attitude is just kind of, okay, this has to be short, and I don't want to sit through it. And I understand. Sometimes you don't want to sit through a long video. I feel the same way, but at the same time, people are fine with no depth. I've got some pea soup here. I've been eating right here. A little bit of fennel. And so what we're dealing with, what we're dealing with is, whether it be, what I talk about, which is primarily religion, or politics, it's a pea soup fog that we're going through. Okay? Now, well, that's delicious. But it doesn't make for understanding politics. I used to think that when the politicians got together, when the politicians were separate, like separately they would lie to you to get elected. I thought, you used to think, it was just for them to be elected. I used to not be, what is being, where you're being told, you can't listen to these conspiracy theorists, they're wrong. Or they're just conspiracy theorists, and that's just completely confabulation. It's not worth looking into or listening to. Then I think when the government got together and the politicians got together, they'd tell you the truth. That's a lie. They're not going to tell you the truth. So we are, and I'm telling you the truth right now, we are headed for disaster, for basically, to some degree or another. Every economy is based on the dollar or uses the dollar very much. We are looking at a collapse of the United States. And of all the years, people would say, well, you as an American are probably, think your country's perfect and great and everything's perfect. No, I think there are a lot of good people in this country. I think there are probably many more bad people in this country, and the ones that are bad are the ones we elect. And the person to blame is you most of the time, because you're the same type of person. Lie and cheat at work, and the politicians get in their offices, they get in their workspace, and they'll lie and cheat too. And then you get upset at their lying and cheating, but you don't want to deal with your lying and cheating. So, I'll talk about religion. That's what I'm mostly focused on. And people say, well, what does that have to do with anything? Morals, yes, but then, okay. So I will deal with morals, and I say, well, yeah, but then politics are really what's happening. It's really real world stuff. Where do you think people get the attitudes and the behaviors that they exhibit? A corrupt society allows for a more corrupt government because they see that the corruption is acceptable. We've had politician after politician with this. Lately we've had Mark Sanford, and that these people are doing evil and wrong, but they're always going to take out the ones that they don't like, and trample them to the ground and put the more corrupt people in there, because that's how government works, that's how people work. The problem with government is always people. And the problem with people is always you. And it may not be a popular thing, and you think you're blaming somebody else, or it's not me, it's this other person. You feel like some condemnation of other people lifts you up because that doesn't apply to you. But often, what we see in politics is just a reflection of society in general. And people thought I was irrelevant. People think that religion and and especially the particularities of religion, how many angels can dance on the head of a pin are irrelevant. So people who have looking at this for politics, they may be a little bit disgruntled by the fact that I've mentioned religion so much in this video. But they say, well, that's irrelevant. Well, let me tell you a little story. My father, many years ago, we're talking about probably about 20 years ago or longer, 25 years ago, told me a story. He said, I don't know if my grandfather was speaking with a politician or who he was speaking with, but, and I would recommend, you've got this supposed dichotomy between the future and the past, where we're moving and where we've been. People that say, well, we need to be grounded and we need to stick in the past. Just because we're grounded doesn't mean we need to stick in the past. People say we need to push forward to the future and cut off the base of the tree. or we need to be progressive. What we've had hasn't worked, or whatever. And we're not seeing that life is working, that government is certainly not working. And the services, whether they provide them or they don't provide them, society is not working, government is not working, and it never will, because it's run by people, and the people that I would say, yeah, you are a lot of times, most of the time, and people always want to use that word, just like when I listen to religious speeches by Paul Washer, and they're in a separate category, makes them feel elite by condemning other people. But back in the day, my father told me, my grandfather died in 1980, and my father told me he had someone come to him, he may have been a government worker, tell him something. So my father told me probably this back shortly after my grandfather died, or maybe before it, but about that time. He told me that somebody went to him and said, look, we don't have to worry. Our economy is so good. We're such a productive nation that we don't have to worry, and they tell us, and I think it's probably true, we've been bankrupt for most of our lifetimes. Unless you're 80 or something like that, 80 or 90, something like that, maybe something like that, 80s or 90s, then our country has been bankrupt for pretty much everybody's lifetime. If anybody that watches this video, our country's been bankrupt that long. And they went to my grandfather. This man went to my grandfather, was talking to my grandfather, and my father just would go on and on about how vehement my grandfather disliked this ideology. They said, oh, don't worry. If we need money, if the United States government needs money, all we need to do is borrow it. We'll just borrow it. And people poo-pooed my grandfather as being, backward, or not looking to the future, or being stuck about money. And you're just a greedy little bastard, Walter Omer Harris. Was my grandfather's name. Oh, Walter Omer Harris, you're just, Walter, there you go again, about how the government's got to be fiscally responsible and all this stuff. And, we'll just, all we got to do is just borrow more money. What we're seeing today, and if you're not seeing it, it's called the Depression. Exactly the same thing that caused the first Depression. Manipulation of money. We not producing our own money, but relying on others to produce it. And they said, and this guy told him, if you knew Walter, actually my father's name is Walter too, his first name, but he goes by his middle name. But if you knew my father Walter, or my grandfather Walter, you would. He was born in I think it was 1910, 1909, could be 1911. I think it was 1910 or 1909. I think it was 1910. And you would have seen, you would have known how he expresses himself and how he feels about stuff. You hear a story about him, you knew what he meant by his reaction. And they said, oh, don't worry about it, Walter. We're just going to borrow more money. And then, we'll, borrow money or something to pay on interest. Well, all we got to do is pay the interest. Well, the interest gets to the point where you can't afford the interest anymore. And when people start pulling out of your country, and when the economy is manipulated, it matters whether the budget is balanced, and it matters whether you're in debt or not. And people in credit card debt and home debt, the home mortgage thing, they're realizing, oh, I shouldn't have taken on that much. They're realizing how dangerous debt is, almost to be avoided like the plague. And they poo-pooed my grandfather and said, oh, that's irrelevant. We don't need to be fiscally sound because we can always borrow. Well, they're not borrowing. They're not wanting to lend to us much anymore because they see the whole fiat currency system is crashing. And it goes to what I'm saying too. Well, Mark, that isn't relevant. Well, Walter, that isn't relevant. Well, you want you to teach on macrame. It's about the same level, same interest level, same importance. But we're seeing that the economy crumble. We're seeing that it matters that we don't have money in the bank, but we are borrowing the money we have. Any of our own money in the bank. And these politicians and their morality matter. And they'll leave you in a pile of rubble, eating your own